Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. Welcome back. I'm going to be reading the Sermon on the Mount today and giving you the background and things I've noticed. So I'm basically going to do my best to explain the Sermon on the Mount and we'll see where it takes us. All right, let's go. I hope I can do this all in one sitting. Let's start at the top. Matthew chapter 5. It says, "When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions." So, first thing to notice about the Sermon on the Mount and or the Beatitudes, whatever you want to call them, it's one of the most famous speeches or teachings that Jesus ever gave. And what's interesting to note there is that he didn't speak to the huge crowds. Instead, he went up on a hillside, and those who actually followed him, it says the committed, climbed with him. So everyone didn't go up the hill. Some just came to see the spectacle. Jesus actually spoke one-on-one with those who followed him up the hill. That's why I keep saying I don't think that there's going to be a rapture. I haven't seen any evidence that suggests that in the prophets and the prophecies. I have constantly said it'll be something where he'll say, "Come over here," and it'll be up to people to follow. Same thing here. He went up a hill, and only those who followed actually got to hear what he had to say. So I wanted to just set the scene with that. It's very interesting what he does. And then he speaks to them at a quiet place so that they could hear him clearly. And he sat down, and then he taught his climbing companions, the ones who were committed. So, and he begins with this: "You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God in his rule." So, most people are really, really stressed out and they're cursing God when they're at the end of their rope. So, as someone who suffers from a very severe case of functional neurological disorder, I can tell you that I have everybody with functional neurological disorder, it's a very, very bad thing to have. You don't want it. It means your brain and the functions that it's supposed to do, it doesn't work correctly. It's not like you have a tumor. It's just all of a sudden your brain doesn't remember how to tell your hand to go to the right. If you say, "Hey, hand, go right," your body starts to go into tremors. And so you're able to think fine, but you can't access your body anymore. It's like having your body taken away from you. That puts you at the end of your rope. Trust me. But then there was less of me. Like, I couldn't go out dancing anymore. I couldn't be busy. I was left to just be in a bed. And that's just all there was left of me was my mind. But then there was more of God, because there's nothing. My husband was gone all day. I had 3 cats, but I was actually unable to do a whole lot with them. And so it was just me and the Lord. And I was able to learn how to walk with him because there were no other options. And when it says there's more of God and his rule, well, his rule is quite just. It means that he has a lot more power in your lives to be on your side. Like, you're in his courtroom more often, and you're not out there being attacked by Satan as much, or having another court come in and speak for you or do justice for you. It's just you and him. And when you're with him more, if there's more of God in your life, that gives him space to be the judge and jury in your life. And so you're fully loved, but you also have full justice, and it's definitely a much more full life. So when you're at the end of the rope, usually that's when it gets very, very clear, yes or no, left or right. It doesn't, all the conflicts that are in our minds and talking our way out of it. Usually when we're at the end of our rope, things become very, very crystal clear, very, very basic. We're in fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, our bodies are just like survive, and we cling to the Lord of life. So that's where we go to survive. And so that's why he says, with less of you, there is more of God and his rule. So we're able to respond to him more quickly and allow him to choose where we go. Basically, think of it like this. He says that we're lambs. right? And that we follow, he's the good shepherd. You can go outside of it, but then you're exposed to the elements. So we can either follow the good shepherd and be in his flock. And if we leave and then we think we know what we're doing, we go out there, we go out on the hillside until, lightning strikes or until a storm comes. That's when a lamb is at the end of the rope. And what do? They run right back into the fold and they get shelter and they get all the warm things. So that's exactly what that means. So then it says in verse 4, you're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. And when he says the one most dear to you, he's talking about the Father, the one. It's a capital O, or the Holy Trinity. So what does that mean? You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Well, only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. Well, when you lose what's most dear to you, a lot of times you can't ever lose the Father. So when he says that, you feel like you've lost what's most dear to you, that's because we're living a pretty cushy life. If we can actually lose it, we can't lose the Father. So it must be something else. So an example of this in my own life, I've had to pretty much let go of everything. I really have had to sacrifice everything because of this disorder that I have. And recently we've had some people come through the house to stay here. And in order to get that done, they needed to do a few things to make us more secure here. And they changed the whole downstairs, not upstairs, because there's nothing up here that there's so it's just beds. But downstairs got changed so much that my husband was just distraught. And I looked at him kind of like, you haven't let it go? I was kind of a little bit incredulous, but he's not sick like I am. For him, home is where he comes home, where I am. It's this little hearth. I had made it, I wasn't so sick when we first moved here. I wasn't as sick. I wasn't near death yet. And so I had already decorated it and put all these little decorations around and all these little lights around and everything and organized the cupboards and gotten them all done. And then everything got changed around and stuff had to be, refreshed. Just this whole thing. I'm not even sure about everything because my husband's kind of the king of downstairs. I'm almost never downstairs. And when I get outside, I'm very blessed. But for my husband, it was so hard and I couldn't relate to him because when you're left to just your brain and nothing else is working on your body, then you kind of have to, the house suddenly doesn't become important anymore. And that's what happens in a crisis is that, I guess that's the thing is you're blessed when you feel you've lost what's most dear to you. What probably besides my husband, what was most dear to me was dancing. I really, really, really love dancing. I did ballroom dancing and I never felt more alive than when I was doing choreography for students and helping. And even when I got my diagnosis, they said I couldn't, it wasn't smart to film anymore. And I had clung on to that and I lost both of those things. But then there left me nothing but to be embraced by the Lord. And so my husband is going through this mourning period of all the house that was built downstairs. And that is 4 years ago now. None of it can be dear to me. I already mourned the loss of it. And so it's amazing how much we choose this earth to be our comfort when it's not actually going to last very long. We're not here for very long in the long things. We're here like the blink of an eye and death comes so quickly. You'd be shocked at how fast it goes. It just, we're in and out. And then eternity comes, then we're back to kind of the situation Adam and Eve were in where they have the tree of life and they live for millions of years with no timeline. Then we go into that and it's the best thing, if you're not familiar with where we're going at the end, then we're going to feel like strangers in a strange land. And a lot of what this Sermon on the Mount is about is letting go of this earth and start thinking about the paradise where we're going to be living for thousands of years, millions of years, where going back to Eden, essentially. And he's encouraging us to invest in Eden, invest in the angels. There are angels all around us. The Lord says he's the God of the angel armies. And so Jesus is saying they're the ones who are watching. Don't sit here and make friends with this tree or this rock. You can, and you can learn from them. But, the money investing in the fashion and the clothes, like that's not you're going to lose them all when you die. None of them are going to go with you. And when you get to the next, stage of life, when this world is destroyed or when we die, are you going to know anyone? Are you going to know any of the angels? Are they going to welcome you home? Are they going to say, like, we've missed you. We're so glad we're finally united and no barriers in between us, no death judgment in between us? And that's what he's saying is, like, until you've lost what's most dear to you, then you can embrace by the Father. That's why people change so much when they lose their children and things like that. When they lose their children or their home burns down or whatever, they're very changed. And some people say, oh, well, they're not as fun anymore. Well, they've been sobered up. Like suddenly we all got sobered up in COVID. COVID is a perfect example. None of us are the same as we were before COVID because suddenly we couldn't be on Instagram anymore. We couldn't be on social media anymore, ignoring the fact that death exists. All of us were faced with any of us could die at any moment tomorrow. Very quick and very ugly death could happen right away. That's realistic. And suddenly we're like, well, wait, what is really important to us? And it just kind of got us off of the treadmill of all these other things, all the lies of what was important to us kind of fell away. It was extremely sobering, I think COVID was. And even now, 3 years later, we're still not kind of being coaxed in by this. It's very hard to still get us into fashion. We look at fashion, at least the people I know I have, I look at fashion, I admire it, it's beautiful, but it's not, my hope isn't in it. It's not my faith, it's not my religion. And so that's what it means. It's like when you see people who lose their children and then they get very sober about what actually matters, they're not so willing to let their children, go outside when they realize there's a wolf out there. Anyway, so that's what a lot of this entire Sermon on the Mount is about, is what is most dear to you? Is it the Father, the one who fathers us, who gave birth to us, who gave life to us? Are we actually spending our time with him? Or are we just investing in this world around us that's, as we've all watched, just can go up in flames in any second? The entire town of Paradise in the USA, on the west coast of the United States, in California, the entire town just burned to the ground. This place that said, we hope we're paradise for you. Its aim was paradise. And I'm like, no, paradise is not here, not on earth, right? So that's a lot of what this is about. So, number 5, before I move on to number 5, I really want to say that he says, only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. So what he's saying is that the Lord is definitely the most dear to us. Like, without him, we don't live. Without him, we don't eat. Without him, we don't have electricity. We don't have gas. We don't have oil. We don't have any of the things. All the things that are amazing, even medicine, all came from him during the millennium of Christ. All of those things were rooted in people who knew the Father and who walked with him daily. Even flight, right? We're starting to lose our privilege of flight because the world is turning darker and darker and people are choosing to go with the fallen. And if you go with the fallen, the more you choose paganism, the more of the gifts of the Lord you're going to lose, if that makes sense. So he really is the most dear to us, even if we don't see him. And what he's saying is if you lose what is most dear to you, then finally you'll see me and you can run to me and be embraced by me. But, you can be very distracted before you lose something that's most dear to you and not notice the Lord at all. You just go on in this, rose-colored glasses kind of life. Okay, number 5. You're blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. And I always have a hard time with reading that without tearing up because this was such a hard lesson for me, I know. And I think it's a challenge for many of us in the age of humanism. This is exactly what Satan does not want. I mean, you can tell who someone serves or what someone serves by whether or not they tell you you are more or less. if they encourage you to think more of yourself than you are, or if they encourage you to think less of yourself. So the Catholic Church really encourages its congregants to think less of themselves, that they are evil, and just, they really, really humiliate people. And then on the other hand, there are other faiths that teach people to be arrogant and that they're better than other people. And both of those are not humility. Humility is being content with exactly who you are. You need to know yourself. This is not like, oh, just blanch yourself out, or wipe yourself out or hurt yourself. This is about turning to the Father and letting him raise you. He knows you. He made you. Find out who you are and be content with it. It means don't feel shame. Be content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's very hard to do. But then you don't have to apologize for your gifts when you're there. And so for me, I had to really climb my way out of thinking that I was very, very little into like being his daughter and realizing that I am valuable. I am, from the Lord. I am created in his image. There are things that he has created me for. There are things within me that I don't know about. He's constantly teaching me about myself. And I have so much more respect for myself in a way. And now I enjoy my gifts. Like, he leads me to go look at this one thing or do this other thing over here. And I end up learning that I can do all of these things. And it's kind of like getting a gift from the Father. And then I enjoy opening it with him. And then I know others, especially in my friend group, they've had to find out that they're not as great as they thought they were. They had, especially women. Men have their own thing, but women, I just know that women, I suppose because I'm a woman, we are taught that we're way more than we are. It is very hard to come to terms with the fact that it's Eve who ate the fig, not the apple, it's the fig. That's really rough to come to terms with, that we have an extra curse on us that men don't have in a certain way, because we were the ones that fell for deception, because we are agreeable and we like to be helpers. But we don't fault ourselves with that at all. We don't ever blame ourselves for that. We're not really cautious of being a woman, and we should be very cautious. We should be very cautious because our hormones, who knows when they're going to strike. Some of us, it's regular. Some of us, it's all over the place. I have FND, and so we never know when my hormones are going to go off. Like, it can go for 6 months in a row and then nothing for a year. My brain wasn't functioning correctly, and so we never knew. Thank you, the Lord, since I got a diagnosis, we actually can, expect things. But I learned then, how horrible of a curse it is. And I really had to learn it could have destroyed everything around us. You add pain to a huge hormonal sweep. My gosh, you can lose all your friends, and you can be highly abusive as a woman. And then I look around my room and I'm like, oh, I have all these things that say, you go girl, you're the boss, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, ooh, that can be a real lie. We can really fall into it. And so that's knowing that I can be as creative, know that I love doing choreography, knowing that people enjoy that, knowing that people enjoy my videos, and being like, that's amazing, but also knowing, okay, I can go off the rails here. That's just who I am. That's humility. Not thinking I'm less than I am, knowing that these are my talents, these are my strengths, that there are good things that the Lord has given me. Just don't be Cinderella. Don't put yourself as Cinderella, but don't make yourself the mother or the daughters either in this story of Cinderella. Healthy, and what the Jesus is talking about here is in the middle of those two, no more and no less. So he says, once you get there, that's the moment you find yourselves and you're proud owners of everything that can't be bought. And that's when people get really jealous, is in you have things that cannot be bought. That's when you begin to shine. And that is worth it. That is so, I've seen so many people, get money, and it's so easy to lose it. But the people who have the money, they don't often spend it. You'd be surprised. Then they start investing in things that can't be bought. Then they start seeking the answers of what can't be bought, because, buying things there's only so far you can go with that. There really is. Money can't buy everything. Perfect example is health. You can't buy your way out of it. You really can't. You'd be surprised. You can't buy yourself a diagnosis, one that actually works. Sometimes you can, but not in everything, not in these days. All right. So, and there's much more than just health, but there's a lot of things. Time with your family. You can't buy that. Many people that there's so much put out there about jealousy and saying these people who have more money and we should be really jealous of them and take them down. And the fact of the matter is that very few of them have time with their families. They don't have weekends off. They don't have evenings off. That's something that can't be bought. That's something when you have a shift and your shift ends, that is such a gift. And Satan doesn't want us noticing that. So time with family, time with the Father, time just being outside an open road instead of being in a small cubicle or in a small mine. Those are gifts. Can't be bought. Big deal. Number 6, you're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink in the best meal you'll ever eat. Well, no kidding. Working up a good appetite for God. I think what that means is you're really blessed when you get to the point where you really miss him, when you can't spend time with him. Then that's because he's the best food and drink. He's the best meal you'll ever eat. That's for sure. I know my husband and I, I think, what we miss most of all with my FND when you're spending time where I'm having an episode that lasts for an hour. And we used to be on the road going left or right wherever the Lord told us to. We miss our time with the Father. We miss our time where it's just him and me and the Father and all three of us talking to each other, conversing with the Father. There's never, again, that can't be bought. I cannot even tell you, that's living. When it's you and the Father. Before I met my husband, I got this conviction that I really need to not focus on, having a partner anymore and trying to date or this or that and find the perfect one. I decided to ditch that and just say, you know what, let me see if I can be happy with the Father alone. And so I focused on being content with the Father. And when that happened, like very soon after he gave me my husband, and I was almost disappointed because I was like, that's less time of just me and the Father together. I was almost jealous of the time that I was like, well, yes, I love this person, but I also love my time with the Father. And now I have that in spades. I miss my husband terribly, but then when my husband comes in the door and then everybody starts calling, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not talking directly with the Father anymore. Yes, I want to talk to everybody. Every once in a while, I'm banqueting so much that, I'm torn. I'm like, which one? Okay, yes, I want to talk to everybody. Yes, I miss everybody. Yes, I really need it. And so, but I also was just having this amazing meal with the Father. And that's a good problem to have when you enjoy the Father that much. It really, really is when you know him that well. I'm looking forward. I no longer fear death. I feel like I'm going to go home, truly go home. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not saying that. I just know it comes so quickly. To me, death is life. That means I get to be with the angels, like the sun and the moon and paradise. No tears, right? The Lord is, I guess I've just learned that the Lord truly is life. We think that Satan is all these things. He says he's rainbows. He says he's these roses. He says he's these skulls. And it's not. It's not. It's much more like the original Hellraiser where they torture you upside down. That's what Satan is. That's Luciferian. That's Druids. That's why so many mafia guys, when they meet people and young people who have promised, they're like, don't get involved with them. They never want it for their kids because it wasn't what was promised. There's no life there. It's just death. And they always regret it. They always regret it because all that comes with it is possession. And then it's not your body anymore. And you never get it back unless you go through great lengths and that's very hard to do, to find your way out of that. So it can happen. I've seen it happen numerous times, but the price that was paid is never what they thought it would be. Anyway, so number 7, you're blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, like full of care, you find yourselves cared for. The first thing I thought of when I saw that was tipping. Like when you tip, your life does receive a blessing. Like there's a reason tipping was invented, and there's a reason why it lasted as long as it lasted, is because tipping is grace. It's literally grace. It's saying I'm thankful and giving, and you end up being cared for. Like the angels start tending to you more when you are caring of others. Number 8, you're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. And again, I can attest to that. Like totally. I mean, there's a ton of examples of that in like Isaiah and Ezekiel and the book of Enoch and the prophets. But let me tell you, there's almost nothing in society that encourages us to consider our inside world. It's not until we get sick, really, that we start to think about it. You don't hear the word character anymore. I mean, there are certain people that are teaching today, like meaning, but they are still saying, like, get a job. They're still saying, make sure you're focused on cleaning and make sure you're focused on order. And that's not going inside of yourself and clearing up your mind and your heart. Character is very, very, very important. And more so than character, it's about understanding the world, like understanding where you are in the world, what you're like, understanding yourself, getting real about who you are. We all think we're saints today. Everything tells us we're good. I was just saying this on Twitter. If you watch that Netflix, I don't recommend Netflix. I have to dig through that and I find like one good thing a week. The most of it is just like Death Eater driven. It's so depressing. I don't know why. Well, I know why, but it's so full of death and propaganda for, like the Nazis and hunters. The fallen are just all through it. And so, but if you already are on it, then there is this documentary called, like, I think this hitchhiker guy named Kai. And everyone asked themselves, like, he went and murdered this guy later on, but they asked themselves, why were we so willing to think this guy was a hero in the beginning? And I said, because he love bombed them. The first thing he ever said to the public was he got on camera and he says, before I say anything, I just want to tell you all that you're special, you're amazing, you deserve everything. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you don't deserve everything. And then he goes on to talk about how he just whacked a guy with a hatchet in the head. And I'm like, that they love bomb you. The guy had a demon on him, and every once in a while would take over and speak for this guy. And the moment he got on Jimmy Kimmel, the moment he had an international audience, first thing he says is Jesus is this hatchet guy. Jesus is a murderer and a racist and whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's a demon, because half the time the guy was great, and then half the time the guy was destructive. And it seemed to come out of nowhere. And that's what demons do. But it was interesting to hear a demon just fully go off. First thing he does, everyone names him hero just because this guy stroked our egos. We have no idea how intoxicated we are with ourselves. And let me explain to you how you can find out who you are real quick. Look at your search history, like not the one that you edit for anybody. You, yourself, in private, go onto your Google search results or your search page. Go in there or go into your bank account and your PayPal, whatever, Zelle. I don't care, whatever it is that you use. It's been so long since I've been able to function and do any banking that I don't remember. I don't even know what things are out there anymore. I used to be in charge of all that, and I lost the function of my fingers, and that was over. So I haven't been able to do anything of normal function like that for a very long time. So if you can, go into that where your money goes and then where your search results go. That will tell you who you are, like your inside self, who you are inside. And then if what he says, putting it right, is, okay, knowing the world around you, where do you actually fit into it? Knowing that this is who you are, and these are the choices that you make, and this is who you've become, not who you wanted to be, but this is who you are right now. And then understanding that the Lord and his kingdom, it's like if you went into a forest and you saw all these kind of like shrubs down at the base of a giant sequoia tree. The Lord's kingdom is like the sequoia tree. The angels, like Satan, he's been out of the kingdom for so long, he's down there in the weeds. Like the rest, like the kingdom of God is huge. His power is huge. We just think that, no, we're huge, even though we're like the little shrubs and bushes at the bottom. And we may be beautiful. We may be made in his image. And so we are taller than others, and we're more intelligent than others. And we're more creative because we're made in his image, and we have beautiful flowers. It doesn't mean we're not beautiful. It doesn't mean that we're not charming. It doesn't mean that we don't have value. But the bottom line is that in power, he's the sequoia. And it goes the same for the angels. They are extremely powerful. They're more powerful than all of us. But like, look at the sun. The sun is an angel. And it's enormous power that comes out of the sun. But even the sun is like dwarfed by the sequoia of the Lord. Like the sun is more kind of like the size of a sofa next to the sequoia. So that's the inside world, is starting to understand that inside of yourself, starting to look around and starting to have an idea of who you are, like what he said before. No more, no less. Get really honest with who you are and what you really think. You know, if you're one of those people that says, oh, I can speak things into existence, that's what gods do. The Lord spoke, and so all the earth was created. And if you're saying, I can speak things into existence, then you've just fallen for an amazing deception. Like, prophets can speak things into existence if it's the Lord's will. Words matter, as he says as we go further into this. Words definitely matter. But that's a whole other... Okay, I'll get into that later because it's coming. So, but putting your mind and heart right, that's very, very important. Once you actually get that right, then when you look out, you're able to see his justice everywhere. You're able to see how the angels work. When you suddenly understand, like the sequoia, you understand there's a Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, then you can start seeing how each of those work out. And he's just saying, if you start getting real with who you are, and then you'll start to be able to get real about what's happening around you, where the lies are and where the truth are and things like that. But I know so many people that don't want to deal with what's going on inside of them. Here's a perfect test. Jesus says that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. Unless you know people who are moving mountains, that means that we've got a lot of work to do inside. He's saying that any of us can move a mountain. Any of us can move a mountain. He's saying that that is possible. You know, if we actually have our mind and heart put right, if we actually understand how powerful the Lord is, understand that Satan is not king of this world. He has to go to the Lord for absolutely everything, and that what we do actually does have consequences. There's just a story. Someone online did an episode on their channel about a girl who had left Europe, or left the UK, flew on over to Peru, spent a few weeks in Peru, dangerous thing to do, and without anybody, just on her own, then flew herself on over to New Zealand, meets up with a Tinder date in New Zealand, and he bashes her over the head and kills her. Like, she goes out and gets drunk with the guy, a stranger that she's never met, and then she texts somebody that she went to his home. They have it all on CCTV, and then her dad comes out and says, you know, she is so important to us, and don't judge her, and please respect her privacy. And I'm like, you mean the fact that she was going on a Tinder date in the middle of nowhere on the other side of the world from you, with no one with her, no one to check on her? I mean, I was like, we understand when somebody goes up on K2 and dies, we're like, that's the risk they took. But we don't say that when we're like, oh, just fly halfway around the world with absolutely no one with you, no one to keep you accountable, no one to keep you safe, like right out there in an age where literally pornography is on the internet, where it's highly addictive. The amount of things that they have done, just like the Nazis studied how to sterilize women, which is what's now called birth control, they also studied pornography to find out how to get people addicted. That's why the average age of addiction is the age of 7, or it was the last time I checked. I have no idea what it is now. They specifically target children. Parents have no idea. And what happens is that the addict can no longer get stimulated until they do more and more and more and more and more and get more and more debased. And then they still can't turn on when they get super debased. And so then they have to bring it into public. And I knew it before they even said it. The guy was convicted of killing this girl because they had it all on CCTV camera. And I knew it before they said it. And they're like, and then afterwards, all these women came out, and it turned out before he killed her, he had sexually assaulted them in like increasing ways. And then he got convicted on 8 counts of assault on Tinder dates. And I'm like, who would have thought, just meeting a stranger in public, that Tinder is the wet dream of every axe murderer on this planet. And who better than to take a girl who has absolutely nowhere there, that's living out of a hostel, for heaven's sakes. I could go on and on, but my point is that you can see that finally when your heart and mind are aligned. You can start seeing things like that more clearly instead of just seeing how they tell you to see it, which is there was no right for this man to do it. Of course there was no right for that man to do it. But when you start getting more honest with reality, you're able to also say that the girl took a risk. Not saying that he was not out of bounds, but we don't all go up on the top of mountains, right? For a reason. There's a risk that goes with it. There is a huge risk that goes with woman. This girl never even hit her 22nd birthday. Everyone texted her from Europe. And they didn't think everyone was like, oh, we should have the right to go out there. It's so terrible that this girl was not able to travel around the world and be utterly protected by everyone. And I was like, who told you that you have that right? Who told you that that is justice? I can tell you right now, she definitely attracted demons in Peru. How many men did she hook up with in Peru? And what did that leave on her? And then those demons told her certain people were safe when she got to New Zealand. There are consequences to our actions. God's law exists whether we want it to exist or not. And once we start going and we start violating some of those laws, then it ends up rebounding on us in these awful, awful ways. And that's why he gives us the freedom. He says, here are the laws. He does his best to tell us what the laws are. But then when you're like, no, I'd rather go play in Satan's playpen, we can't quite, it is not just for us to cry foul and say, hey, I should have deserved the protection of someone that was living in the Lord's playpen. It's like, no, the Lord is good. And if you say, okay, I only accept that these parts are good, but nothing else is good, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to reject those laws. Then all of a sudden you get struck by a thunderstorm. And the angels are sitting there doing face palms every day at the choices we make. And so that's why it's important to get our hearts and minds right and put right in that we see truth for what it is, whether it makes us unpopular or not, that we understand truth so that we cannot be touched. All right, moving on to number 9. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out why sports have been growing since Satan came back in the 1840s. One of the biggest things Queen Victoria did was with Rome was to bring back the Roman Olympic Games. You'll notice that all the sports that kind of do everything like the FIG for gymnastics and even the music industry today, all of those socialist, global socialist governments, they're all based in Europe. And that's because they were like, let's bring back all of these pagan things that we had before from when most of humanity just followed Satan. They're like, let's bring them all back. And I was trying to figure out what's bad about it. Like, what's bad about watching these athletes achieve amazing things? And then Jesus says, you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. Same thing, like it's hard to say sometimes that the UFC, the fighting is bad. I sometimes I really enjoy watching some of the fights, and then sometimes I'm like, no, that's extremely wrong, and I can't figure it out. And the bottom line is that peace, it doesn't even have to be peace. I know everyone's different, but I've learned that when you get to cooperate, it means you get to enjoy everybody's gifts and learn from each other and see amazing things that you can't see before. Cooperation is so much better than competition. Like, in many ways, the Olympic Games are blessings because we are cooperating. I think that's what people really love about the Olympic Games, is that there's so much cooperation. We have this huge ceremony ahead of time and we have it after time. But at the same time, a lot of these athletes, they sacrifice so much. They are unable to move later on in life. Almost all of them end up a ton of drugs. They're on rounds of meds like me. I've seen some of the Olympic women. They did a documentary on them, and I was like, oh, they look like I do. Like, they look the same way. They are barely able to walk. They need their kids to help them get into the house. And it's like, we never talk about that side of it. There's a huge problem with it because in most ways, competition is about power. To drive yourself to hurt yourself that badly, what's driving you besides abuse from your parents? Then it's power. Then we're doing it for power. But we can enjoy cooperation with each other so much more if we're not aiming for compete or war. There's so much more to be gained. The Lord is so various, and we get, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that we do where we're cooperating with each other rather than competing or fighting with one another. Sometimes I think world trade is that way. I've some really amazing business meetings where people from around the world are either on Zoom, and I mean, I know I've learned just from stories, I've learned tremendous things about other cultures that are great. And there seems to be this crackling life that happens when everyone there is interested in cooperation and just learning, and they're enjoying each other's company. No one really melts into they don't become other things. Everyone seems to stay uniquely their own person. But when it comes together, it's like, think about a feast. Would you rather be at a great feast, or would you rather be, whipping each other? If you have the option for a great feast, then that's much, much preferred. And I used to experience that in dancing when I first started dancing ballroom. I didn't understand why everyone was pushing me to compete. I was like, I don't want to beat anybody. I don't want to be the person that took something from anybody. I don't want to beat anyone. And then it got to the point where they're just like, well, then we're just going to not dance with you. We're not going to pay attention to you unless you get that taste for blood and try to beat people. And so I just was like, well, if I want to keep dancing, I guess I just gotta go compete. That's terrible. It was always more enjoyable when everyone was just dancing together, when it was off and everybody's out there together. But there are people who want power and they're just desirous. I've run into plenty of them where their only option is number one. That's a miserable life. That's a miserable life on their deathbed. It's not a pleasant time for a person like that on their deathbed. So it says you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete. Yeah, you're really blessed if you're able to do that. If you're able to be someone, not just a peacemaker, but a life maker, to bring cooperation together. I mean, matchmakers say they're very blessed because look at what comes out. A wedding comes out of that, of two people who are really in love, who really enjoy each other, who feel like they found home together. My goodness, those people, if they're actually a really, a couple that's truly built for one another, that's truly designed for one another, they can be a powerhouse. And so that can be a joy. Unfortunately, a lot of matchmakers today do it for power as well, to bring the family's power. But yeah, if you're someone who's able to be a mediator, that's kind of mediation. Anyway, so that's what he means about that. Number 10. Well, at least that's the best I can give you for right now, because we're only number 10 and I'm on 44 minutes in. I hope this is helping you guys. I have driven all the cats out of my room but one. All right, here we go. Number 10. You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. Oh boy. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. That's just true. In a lot of ways, when I found my husband, there was almost the greatest thing of it was the relief of someone who didn't find my love or my relationship with the Father, or how deeply I was in love with the Father, my husband found that to be so invigorating, and he loved that. He always wanted to hear me talk more, and I wasn't used to it because by then the persecution had grown so great. I had learned to just change my ways so much. I had just learned to not talk. There's not many people, because, well, there's a thing that, like, Jesus says it, like, if you're in your own town doesn't take it very well. My family has grown tremendously, obviously, once I left my town, but my husband was in my town. And so I was like, wow, really? You're interested in hearing about, like, my day with the Father. But he talked about his day with the Father. And once we left, then we gained friends all over. Like, oh, it was just feasting on God is so absolutely fantastic. But he's saying to not fight back at the persecution, but to go ahead and, like, understand how much of the kingdom that you get from it that you wouldn't have had otherwise. The more isolated you are, then the more that you lean on him and talk to him and seek out his voice and seek that quiet corner to hear him. And so one of the greatest things I've learned is that when they persecute you, never think that justice isn't being done. It's much easier for me to turn a cheek knowing that the Lord's going to take care of them. They're breaking God's law too, to go after a saint, to go after someone who walks and talks with the Father to the point where they hate it so much that they attack you. You have no idea how bad that snaps back on them. We don't tend to look at their lives and see the utter chaos and destruction they bring upon themselves. So that's why you can just turn the other cheek and lose weight, because then you're like, you handle it, Jesus. You handle it, God. And you just get to go and walk off with him, and you feel pushed into his arms. You read more of what he said. You try to find others. I know when I was growing up, when I got my first persecution, I learned about one of the prophets, Elijah. He didn't have his own book or anything, but he did all this work and then was exhausted when he did it, and he went off into the desert, and he was like, oh, just kill me now, Lord. And the birds fed him and brought him everything. But he's like, I'm so over it. I loved that story because I was like, I understand that. When I was at UCLA, sometimes it would just get so bad. And then I read Elijah, and I was like, okay, it's happened before. And the Lord tended and gave them all the food that they needed. And I just felt better. I felt like I knew the Lord better. And I also felt like, there are friends on the other side who have actually, he didn't even pass away, did he? He got to get a chariot of fire brought down for him. And so would I have ever learned about Elijah? Ever, if I hadn't been persecuted at UCLA? Do you really think that would have happened? Probably not. It probably would have taken me a lot longer. I wish I'd learned more about him. I mean, I saw a statue of him recently with a sword in his hand, and I was like, why does Elijah have a sword in his hand? That's very odd. And then I read more, and I was like, oh, because he killed a bunch of prophets of Baal, like of Satan's. I was like, oh, that's why. Because I was like, I wonder if a whole bunch of people just know Elijah as the warrior. I knew him as the guy that was like, Lord, I'm done. Like, take me now. Like, I've done it all. And he was so powerful. He was even making fun of the other side. He was like, nana, nana, boo, boo. What, your God can't do that? Your God, oh, was he asleep? Oh, he was throwing down all these. As far as I know, Elijah's the only prophet in the Bible who, like, threw down with Satan's followers, with the Death Eaters, with the Nazis, and just was like, like, totally burning them hard, like hardcore burns. And, like, he's a total G. Like, I am telling you, Elijah is like the G of the entire Old Testament and Torah. Oh my gosh, Elijah is it. But then after throwing down and being humorous and everything like that, when he was in private with the Lord, he was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm drained. I'm done. But that's the point, is that it drove him to be with the Lord and the Lord alone. And trust me, the other guys got it. Like, they got theirs. You could believe that the Lord's going to go ahead and get them, right? All right. So 11 through 12. And then I'll probably just go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll go ahead and make this a part series to get through everything. So 11 and 12 of Matthew 5, Matthew chapter 5, Gospel of Matthew chapter 5. So verse 11, not only that, but count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that truth is too close for comfort and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer even though they don't like it, I do. All of heaven applauds, and know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble. Okay, I've already said a lot of this. Like, you just said a lot of things. I'm like, yep. See, he said it too. Like, not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. That's something really, really important to notice, is that it's not about discrediting you. It's not personal. It's to discredit Jesus. Usually, when we walk or talk with God and we know the Lord and when we know Jesus, people figure it out. They realize that person has something different about it. They have light, and all the demons that are around. If some kid in your classroom is always gaming and he's on his phone and he's always gaming, he's got demons on him. The more and more you do gambling, the more and more greed, the more you chase greed, the more demons that attach themselves to you. And then they see you and they go, because they see the light in you. They see Jesus in you. And so then they'll start mocking you in order to discredit Jesus, because they're trying to make fun of you because you have light. And Jesus is saying, it's about me. They have a problem with me, not you. They have a problem with me. They want to go after my name. And it's an amazing thing to remember that, because then you realize you're not alone. You're not on this earth alone, that this Jesus is with you so much that they are persecuting you to get to Jesus. That's a compliment for the demons to be like, wow, Jesus walks with them this much that we're going to have to defeat them and mar their name. And this is exactly what it means. It means you've made the demons uncomfortable. You made other people uncomfortable, because they start to feel their sin. They start to feel that they are not gods. And then remember that even though everyone around like may scorn at you or scoff at you or whatever, Jesus says that he's applauding and all of heaven applauds. And you know what? All of heaven, 2/3 of the angels did not fall. The ones who fell are the minority. So you've got the majority of heaven and they are applauding you. Like, it's a huge family and a very powerful family. Really, if you think about it, do you really want the kid next to you in the seat? Do you really want to have his approval or the son's approval? Like, I'm much more interested in what the angel of that's the son. That's the other thing I really want to point out about this, is that we are not alone. Like, you're never alone. Like, my friends we had to outfit my house with cameras because of my disorder is so bad. I'm finally slowly getting out when I got the diagnosis, but the diagnosis also helped us realize how ill I am and how close and possible it is for me to trip and hit my head. So it's, in a way, it's very, very dangerous to leave me alone, but that's just life. I mean, everybody has challenges. And so one of the things we had to do was kind of equip the house with a bunch of cameras. And any other time, I would have been like, I don't want to be watched. I don't want to be watched. I don't want to have anybody be able to log in. But, COVID happened. My husband has way more responsibilities at work now. And so it can't just be him monitoring the cameras. And so I don't move most of the time, but a few people have it. And I'm just like, by the time it happened, I was like, well, the angels are already watching. Like, there's millions and millions of angels and they already know everything I'm doing. Like, what am I going to be ashamed about? Like, I'm already watching, like, I already know myself so well. I'm already walking with the God that I'm just kind of like, sure, like, what are you going to see that isn't being watched by so many others? You have to think about it. You're always you may think you're alone in your room, but you're not. You're in an amphitheater with all of heaven watching, with angel armies watching. And not only that, but you also have all of the fallen watching, all the demons watching. Like, they're very interested, especially right now. They're really hunting down any light because we stick out. There's so much darkness. And so he's saying, all of heaven applause. Know that you're in good company. That's what I want to encourage you the most as we wrap up part 1 here, is that you're not alone. Like, we know that there's an angel of the mist. We know that each of the volcanoes, each of one of the major volcanoes is an angel in charge of the lava, in charge of this. There's even angels in type of, there's a different angel for the dew, that's angel for the frost, that's angel for the glaciers. There's an angel for the rivers. Like, there is an angel for like all these different aspects. And today, a lot of these angels are referred to as gods by other cultures. And thereby, some of these other cultures have a better time of it than other nations because they at least respect that they are not gods, that these other gods are doing. And if something rumbles, like if the volcano goes, if an angel of a volcano goes, some cultures just go bury the dead and move on and keep being evil. Other cultures are like, maybe we should change. That's a sign, and they change. So then they don't break God's law as much and things go better for them. They're more richly blessed because of that, and because they're humble and they understand that things in the sky mean something. Like, some giant thing happened in the sky. Well, a lot is happening in the sky. Jesus said, you'll know from the signs in the sky. And I'm like, yeah, there's something in the sky every single night. There's so much going on. There's so many different things happening in the sky. And I read this article and a video that was saying that a certain kind of comet, a red comet or a red star, crossed over the heavens of China. And the people are like, we know what that means. When that happens, that was the last apocalypse. They had a sign that was coming. Now it's come again. And we know from our history records what that means. And I was like, great, China knows something that, the USA has no clue about. I'm sure Germany, unless you're a witch, is like, I have no clue what that is. The most profitable, the most lucrative society there is, Germany. They have more profits than anyone, including China, including India, with all of their mines and with their 2 billion people. Germany is making more money than anyone else because there's a whole long story about why that is. And people don't even have them on their radar, but the West, even knowing all that, even having all of that, we still, unless we're into witchcraft or astrology and have gotten into that lie, we think the signs in the heavens, God doesn't speak to us that way. And that is not true. Satan has nothing original. He has nothing original to say, nothing original to do. He can't even build original things. When he has his demon and his Nephilim, he has to actually, the angels had to read Enoch. The fallen angels had to sleep with human women, the Lord's creation, in order to get their Nephilim, to get their giants, and to have their demons, their entire hordes of demons. When a giant dies, if you don't kill this spirit, then the demon goes on living, that part that's angel. So I think I'm going to stop right there. We are almost at exactly an hour, 60 minutes, and that's a whole bunch. That's a lot. Jesus always has, I couldn't believe when I saw the Sermon on the Mount was 3 chapters. And I was like, you want a commentary on it too, Lord? I mean, I'm only doing this because the Lord asked me to. I was like, there's so much to do. What do you want? Everybody wants different things. And he's like, do these things. And I was like, okay. And then I got his 3 chapters and I was like, Lord, like Elijah, take me now. There's so much. I have F&D. I have F&D. But you know what? Like, he's helped me do it. It's a miracle. I can go to my doctor and be like, I read aloud 3 chapters twice, man. Twice. So that's very exciting. So the Lord is so good. But honestly, couldn't do without you guys. And that's one thing I want to leave you with. Actually, I have a thing. Just a side note. I used to worry so much about listing my tweet a certain way or having it organized a certain way or listing my video a certain way and obeying all these laws that they give us. And finally, at some point, I'd done some research on the things the Lord was saying and started reading it with the Message translation. And it suddenly hit me that if the Lord wants a tweet read, it's going to be read. Like, Silicon Valley and web developers are not more powerful than the Lord and his angels. When you see people, when you start watching crime documentaries and you're like, why the hell did they do that? They did all these things, then suddenly they just turned themselves into police, or they didn't ask for a lawyer, and they just confessed, or they did, and you're like, why? And I'm like, because the Lord, just like Nebuchadnezzar, he can just move you one way or the other. And I think I already talked about this in the Lost Laws of the Lord. So just, instead of stressing, really just worry about today. That's a lot of what this is about too. You've got plenty to deal with today. And if you do it with the Lord, today becomes quite of a roller coaster. Quite frankly, for me, I kind of focus on hour by hour or 5 minute segment by 5 minute segment. Like, what am I going to do right now? Because there's so much. There's such a great feast and banquet from the Lord that I'm like, oh, what is he good? What are we going to eat next, Lord? What are we going to feast on next? And tomorrow just seems like eons away, and I don't even let my family anymore. I request that they don't tell me, here's what we're going to do for the next who knows how many. I'm like, please don't say that, like, because something could change, and invariably something does. I'm like, just tell me what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes, and I'll listen to that, if that makes sense. So anyway, all right, I love you guys so much, and I will see you in part 2, and I'm so glad you joined me for this, and I want to really thank you for your support, because I would never be able to speak like this if it hadn't been for your support. So I don't know how I can thank you, but I know that, again, that's being caring, that's being full of care. So I know that you're being blessed by being that caring when you support me. So the Lord takes care of it. I'm like, I can't thank you enough. And I'm like, the Lord's going to do it. I know the Lord's going to do it or has done it. So, and I can just rest easy in that. And that's one of the lessons we just learned. All right, part 2, when he says it's time, when I'm able, and when in my walk he's like, let's do this now, that's when I'll do it. I love you so much. His timing is perfect. I've learned that. When I try to control it, boy, does it go wrong. So I see it all the time. You guys see it in my tweets. I post something that I think is really big, and then it's like, oh, look at that. It's exactly at this holy number and this holy number. I can't control that. That's the Lord. That's how huge he is, and that's what a caring and loving Father he is. So he's got this. I love you. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Part 2. Bye.